All right, in this video now we're going to talk about the structure of our School of Apologetics. So let me just write up here the word apologetics, and you should know that this can also go by the name of, and has traditionally gone by the name of, fundamental theology. Okay, fundamental theology or apologetics. And the reason why it's called that is because this is where we use reason to show that revelation exists, that God exists at all, and that He has revealed Himself in the first place, and where to go to find that revelation. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is the whole foundation for theology, and that's why we call it fundamental theology. And really what it is, even though it's called fundamental theology, it is using philosophy to show the foundations of the faith. Okay, so philosophy showing the foundations of faith. So even though you get into some theological disputes later on in the various parts of apologetics, still it's considered a lot of times a kind of a use of philosophy to show the foundations of faith. Now, for Catholics then, when it comes to apologetics, you need to understand that apologetics, fundamental theology, is broken up into three levels or three categories. All right, so I'm going to make my first one over here like this. This is number one. This is the question of the existence of God. The most foundational of the foundational issues is the existence of God. If God doesn't exist, you can forget everything else, right? If there is no God, as St. Thomas Aquinas says, all religious matters come to nothing. All religious discussions are just moot at that point, because God doesn't exist, okay? So you have to have this sort of foundation first and foremost. This is also called natural theology. Natural theology, meaning that using our natural powers of reason, we use those to determine what we can know about God. If we can know that God exists, and if so, what God is like. Natural theology, the science of God through the powers of our natural reason. You see, very important. Traditionally, this has been called the demonstratio religiosa. Okay, and the reason why is because you're demonstrating the existence of religion in the first place, that God exists, that there is a creator and designer of the universe. And so in the Aquinas School of Theology and Philosophy, we have whole courses on this foundational topic of the existence of God. We have, for example, a course on the first cause argument, where we look at the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. We also have a course on the design argument for the existence of God, again, always following the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. We have a course on the moral argument for the existence of God. So these are all three full-blown courses that cover natural theology, that cover the existence of God in a kind of a positive way, where we use reason to show that God exists. And we also have some other courses in here on answering atheism. You know, how to answer the top 10 objections that atheists come up with to, undermine belief in God. How to answer the problem of evil. If God exists, why is there evil in the world? So these are arguments that atheists would just kind of come up with on their own to defend their own view. And so we have courses on how to answer those sorts of objections as well. And also, we have a program here on how to critique atheism. That is, we show how philosophy can undermine the most common reasons people have for becoming atheists. So all this falls under this first section of apologetics, this natural theology. And as we move on in the Aquinas School here, we plan to have certifications for all these levels. So for example, you could take all these courses and then take a certification exam and earn your certificate in natural theology. You see, just to demonstrate that you really do have this knowledge down pat. Okay, so that's the first and most basic level of apologetics, is the existence of God. But of course, once we know God exists, okay, that gets us quite a bit of ways. We know atheism is false. We know there's a creator out there. But which God are we talking about? Could it be the Hindu God or the God of Islam or some other God, Zeus or Apollo, whatever? That brings us to the second part, or the second level of our apologetics curriculum. Okay, this is level 2 here. It's what I call the divinity of Christ. This is where the first level we showed the existence of God. In the second part, we talk about the divinity of Christ. So we use philosophy and natural theology to talk about how we can demonstrate that God exists. In this section, we show who that God is. Okay, not only do we know that God exists, but we also know which one of all the alleged different gods we're talking about. We're talking about Christ. Christ is that God. You see what I'm saying? So this is the divinity of Christ. This is the level of Christian apologetics, where we show that Christianity is true and all non-Christian religions are simply false. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is where we bring in things like historical evidence for the divinity of Jesus and the divine origin of the Christian religion. Classically, this one has been called the Demonstratio Christiana. Okay, the Demonstratio Christiana, the demonstration of the Christian religion. You see what I'm saying? All right. So, and again, we have a whole full-blown course in this. And actually, when we sold them separately, in DVD form and stuff, this is our bestseller. It's called the Christ 101 program, and it's a full-blown program of over 30 lessons on this very topic and covers all the bases. So, when you're ready for this level, definitely check out this program. And also, just as before, as we said about the existence of God, we're going to have a certification. We're going to have a certification exam in Christian apologetics. So you can not only earn your certification in natural theology, you can also, once you've mastered this material and get through our exam with an acceptable score, you can earn your certificate in Christian apologetics. All right. So, logically speaking, again, we're talking about fundamental theology and apologetics. We can use reason to show that God exists. We can go in and also show that Christ is that God. But we're still not done yet, because there are a lot of different Christian religions out there, a lot of different people representing the teachings of Christ, and which one of those is true? Is it the Baptist? Is it the Methodist? Is it the whoever else? You see what I mean? The Orthodox, Catholics. That's where we go into the third level of apologetics, for Catholics that is where we talk about the authority of the church. So level 3, the authority of the church. Okay, classically called, to kind of keep with this sort of classical naming scheme, it was called the Demonstratio Catholica. So once we know from philosophy that God exists, and then we can know that Christ is that God. Okay, which version then of Christ's teachings is the true one? That brings us to this one. Okay, the authority of the church, Demonstratio Catholica, where we show that the Catholic Church is the divinely appointed guardian of that revelation from Christ. And we have courses coming out in this area as well. And again, you could earn your certificate in the authority of the church area as well. Okay, so that's how the apologetics curriculum works, and it's really important because this is where you show the whole foundation of the faith. You see, so when you go on to study theology proper, that presupposes, because when you're studying theology, you are studying God's revelation. Well, that presupposes that you know that God has revealed himself in the first place. You see, so standard theology presupposes all this fundamental theology, and that's why it's so important.